continue with the laws of marriage. Now, these laws of marriage are not like, what most people think laws of marriage, going to be very, it's the word I'm thinking of, like, lovey-dovey. It's very, a very technical. We learned the laws of who can get married. What if you marry with a condition? What if you marry, so many different variables. And we continue. The following laws apply. When a man weds a virgin who was widowed or divorced, or underwent a rite of chalitza, because no, good question. No, it's a valid question. That's a valid question. No, because he either died or divorced her before. And so remember that there's two parts to marriage. First part is kiddushin, right? Which back in the day you would then not live together. You would prepare for the wedding up to 12 months. And we learned that yesterday. And then you would make chuppah, which means to bring into your private place. And that's why we have afterwards, in privacy, chassan, right? Right. But what happened if it didn't get consummated? It could be an instance it didn't, right? So I'm explaining the first part, there is no consummation. Only in the second part there is. And what happens if they were under the chuppah and he died right after, right?
Parameters, right?
Again, we're learning the parameters of the law, right? If she was widowed or divorced or underwent the rite of chalitza after erisin, so erisin alone, right? So now the issue is over here about the ksuba, because we have a difference. We're learning about the ksuba. Ksuba is a marriage contract, right? Which is something from the sages, by the way, we learned yesterday. The sages instituted the woman has to have a marriage contract. And as long as she's not, by the way, as long as she doesn't have it or she doesn't know where it is, she can't live with her husband. Why? Because the sages instituted because don't want that a husband will just get upset with her one day and just divorce her easily. Biblically he could. The rabbis put this step in there because then there are going to be ramifications of what he has to pay out.
Are they still married?
Huh?
Are they still married?
Still married, but can't live together until you have ksuba. So, by the way, when the Rebbe got married in 1929, the wedding went till early in the morning, and then after the wedding was over, the Rebbe went and came back because they couldn't find the ksuba, couldn't find the marriage contract. The previous Rebbe had to rewrite a marriage contract. They couldn't find it. See, a woman can't live, right, without having the marriage contract. Why? Because it's a protection for her. Right? It's a protection for her. That's what the sages instituted. So, any case, that's what we're talking about over here. So we're talking about over here. What will be her status? Is she considered? She had kiddushin, the first level of marriage. She did not consummate the marriage. She either got divorced or her husband died. Right? Is her ksuba, does she get 200 or 100? If she was not a virgin, then she gets only 100. If she was married already, second marriage, get only 100. If it's a first marriage and a virgin, then she gets 200 shekel or whatever. That, right? She gets double. That's the issue over here. We're talking about now in the second, right? So what did she get in the ksuba? So the ksuba, which she is entitled to from her second husband, is 200 zuz, right?
Okay.
She gets as if she was never married because it wasn't consummated, right? If, however, she had been wed, the ksuba to which she is entitled from her second husband is 100 zuz, is half of that. Once she is wed, she is considered a non-virgin. Others, even though maybe she didn't have relations, but they had chuppah. Remember, there's two parts to the wedding. If, let's say, right, back in the day, they had engagement, gave a ring, you're wed. You're so wed that if you have relations, either one of you, it's considered adultery. That's liable for death sentence for either one, even though they're not living together, living in separate homes. Right? They didn't. Now, a year later, they make chuppah and they get the Sheva brachas, right? And he walks away from there before he consummates the relationship and he dies. Or he decides, or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's not about a reason here. It's about understanding the parameter of the law. He says, yeah, I don't want her. I'm writing a get. Right? Finish with her. Right? And he didn't consummate. But he had chuppah. And then it's considered like she's a non-virgin, even though they didn't have relations. For the second husband that she's going to marry, and therefore she'll only get an ksuba 100.
She's not a virgin, but she is a virgin. For a second.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Similar rules apply when a man weds a virgin bride who is a Canaanite maidservant who was freed, and who was a convert who was held captive by a non-Jews and freed. The maidservant had been freed, and the convert had been converted, and the woman had held captive and redeemed before the age of 3 years and 1 day. They are entitled to ksuba of 200. If they took place and reached the age, their ksuba is only 100. So likewise, in all these instances over here, if it's under 3 years old, so then you get a full ksuba of 200. If it's after, then you get a ksuba of 100. Why do sages ordain that these women receive a ksuba of only 100 even though they are virgins? Because the presumption is they can be accepted as a fact that can be accepted as a fact that a woman who is wed will engage in marital relations, and simply by that a maidservant, a non-Jew woman, a woman held captive by non-Jews will have engaged in relations. Hence, they are ordained that such a woman is entitled to 100 Jews, whether they engage in relations or not, with regard to all matters they are considered as non-virgins. So just like remember, this is rabbinic law, right? This is not biblical law. So the sages instituted that that the and this is not about this is about what's the word I'm looking for is I can't find the word, about a principle, right? As opposed to the principle is that by law considered non-virgin vis-a-vis the ksuba, the marriage contract. That's where the discussion is over here. And therefore, what is obligated the second husband, right? Is he obligated to as someone who's a virgin or not virgin? So in the case of someone who was non-Jews had taken that woman, right? Like right now, Hamas, right? So we know what happens to the women, right? We know what happens. So in that regard, the halacha is it's not a question, it's not their fault. It's not a fault over here. It's about a reality, right? It's about a reality. So that person now who will get married will be considered a non-virgin, even if she might be a virgin. It might be, can happen, but this is what the assumption is, and therefore and it's only about the marriage contract where that our discussion is over here. So vis-a-vis the marriage contract, she would get only 100 zuz, right, instead of 200. Okay. A muka eitz is granted a ksuba of 100 zuz. even if her husband wed her under the presumption that she's a virgin, and then discovered that she was a Muka'etz, she's entitled to a ksuba of 100. Muka'etz is someone who
So the difference between Yuka is 200 and Juz is 100.
no, Muka Eitz means one struck by a piece of wood. I mean, a woman claims that she is a virgin, but yet that she lost her virginity naturally, right? Or by some accident that happened, right? So, yeah, and yeah, that she lost her virginity, not through relations. That's what she claims. So she would still get and indeed maybe it was, right? But she would get a ksuba of 100. When a girl less than 3 years engages in sexual relations, even the partner was an adult male, she's entitled to a ksuba 200. Ultimately, will heal and be a virgin like others. So it sounds pretty crude, and it is obviously an adult having relations with a girl less than 3 years old. So that we say that her virginity will come back. That's what halacha says. And therefore, she would get a ksuba of 200. Again, that's our point over here, right? Yeah.
That is a fact.
Yeah.
Grows back.
It grows back. Similar when a boy below the age of 9 years old engages in sexual relation with an adult woman, she's entitled to a ksuba of 200, as if she had never engaged in sexual relations. For it is only after a boy reaches the age of 9 years old and one day that relations with him are of a consequence. Before that age, they are of no consequence. Now, it sounds crazy. Who's doing that? It doesn't matter. That's not the point. Could be no one is doing it. But the halacha is that if a boy had relations with a woman and he's 8 years old, that woman's considered a virgin for the ksuba. That's all. Did she do something wrong? Yeah, but it's not right and wrong over here, right? That's not the point over here. The point is, what is the category? How is this person viewed in halachic terminology vis-a-vis the ksuba? That's it.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
When a virgin is a baigeris is 12-and-a-half-year-old girl, right? Half a year after showing signs of maturity. From 12, now if she didn't show signs of maturity, then it's signs of maturity that she shows from that time a half a year later. A blind or an eyeless is of someone who cannot give birth, right? A woman that doesn't have the capacity to give birth. She is entitled to a ksuba of 200. By contrast, no provision is made for ksuba for a woman who is deaf, mute, or mentally incompetent. Rationales and no provision has been made for the marriage of mentally incompetent women at all. Well, you know why? No, it is actually very fair. David just said that that's not fair. Why should the man? Remember, this is a rabbinic law, right? So the rabbinic law is taking into consideration the human condition. If a guy is going to marry a mentally incompetent woman, right? Well, is that a big blessing for her? Boy, is it ever. So for him to do that, what do you think will be an incentive for him to do it? That he's going to have to worry about if he's going to divorce her later because maybe he can't take it. So the sages were smart. And they said, not like what you thought and me, right? They said, there's no provisions for ksuba, so that way he will consider to marry her and she'll be taken care of because otherwise she may not be taken care of. Someone will take care of her who's mentally competent. But the only way that will happen is if you give him a way out on the other side. So therefore there's no ksuba.
She gets 100.
Huh?
She gets 100 compared to a blind person who gets 200.
No provisions made for ksuba, we just said. No ksuba. There's no ksuba here. Remember, ksuba is in order to protect the woman. Here, the protection of the woman is that she will get married. That's a protection. It's the other way around. Do you follow? Menachem Hillel. Do you follow what you just said?
Yeah.
The protection's on the other side. that who's going to marry a mentally incompetent woman? No one. Well, unless you give an incentive. What will be the incentive? I don't have to. If I decide afterwards I can't live with her, I'm going to be able to divorce her without having to pay out. Oh, let me consider that. Right? Let me consider that. Especially, by the way, back in the day when you could marry more than one woman. Right? So maybe I'll do her a favor and marry her. So I'll take care of her. But the incentive will be to do that is that I don't have the obligation on the other side. Because on this side, no one was taking care of her. So at least there's someone now that will. That's what the sages said. Okay, so it's that, huh? Yeah, get this. Yeah, we're talking about ksuba. Remember, it's about a marriage contract here. It's not about anything else. We're not talking about get over here. With regard to a woman who is deaf mute, although our sages made provisions for her marriage, they did not entitle her for ksuba, so that the man will not refrain from marrying her. Just as he is entitled to, she is not entitled to ksuba, so too her husband is not obligated to provide her with a livelihood and grant her with other ordinary conditions of the marriage contract, because she's deaf mute. And again, who's going to marry this person? So it's just, right? So one who wed a woman who is deaf mute and her difficulty was remedied, she's entitled to ksuba, and to the other conditions of marriage contract, the amount of her ksuba will be 100 zuz. But if she becomes healed, then she gets a regular ksuba, right? At that point, she has to get a ksuba. Okay. Number 5, when a man marries a woman who is deaf mute or mentally incompetent and writes her a ksuba for 10,000 zuz, the obligation is binding. It was he who desired to diminish his assets. So what if he did make a ksuba? Does it mean he can't make a ksuba? Yes, he could. And he made a ksuba for whatever reason, right? For the mentally incompetent or deaf mute woman that he just married. And he's put 10,000 zuz. That's a lot of money. He could do it because it was his option. He didn't have to. He wasn't obligated at all. But it doesn't mean he's not allowed to. He could. He wanted to secure her for whatever reason. He wanted to. So it's valid. In other words, not saying it's not. If you say it doesn't have to give a ksuba, it doesn't mean he can't give a ksuba. Okay? You see the wisdom, the compassion of our sages. So clearly and obvious. I mean, it wasn't so clear and obvious until I explained it. Or Rambam explained it, right? Number 6. Following rules apply when a deaf mute or mentally incompetent man married a woman who was mentally competent. Now it's the other way around, right? Even afterwards, a deaf mute disability appears, the mental incompetent person gains stability. They are under no obligation to their wives. However, the men desire to remain married to the woman after their own well-being has been restored. The wives are entitled to ksuba. The value should be 100 zuz. After they get better. So now we're talking about the other side, right? Why are there no obligation to their wives? How come? Because they're mentally incompetent. They're not, because someone who's mentally incompetent isn't obligated in mitzvahs, right? So therefore, the mitzvahs that he would be obligated to her, he's not obligated. Why she would marry him, that's irrelevant to the point, right? That's not, there's not feelings. We're not going into feelings here. We're going into facts, right, of the parameter of the law, right? And he's not obligated in mitzvahs. Just like not obligated, mentally incompetent means he's not obligated to put on tefillin. We're talking about someone who's, that kind of mental incompetence. Now, where do you draw the line? What's that? That's a different story, right? So he's not obligated in what? In providing for her, because he's mentally incompetent. A deaf mute also is on that level, right? But now he gets better. Now he is responsible, and he has to write a ksuba. Yeah. Again, yeah, but that's not our context here, so that's why not speaking about that. If the deaf mute's marriage was made by the court and they write his wife Iksuba against his assets, she is entitled to everything the court has prescribed for her. So let's say the court now made the Iksuba. And how could they make it? Because it's going on their minds. You have to have a mind to make a ksuba. You have to have a mind. First bracha we ask in davening, das. For anything, we have a healthy mind. That's the first thing we ask in our Shemona Esrei, right? This guy doesn't have a healthy mind. But you know who does? The court. And the court now made the ksuba, right? From his assets. Why would they do that? Well, maybe because this woman therefore will marry him and take care of him, right? So then she is entitled to everything that the ksuba says. Court will not arrange a marriage for a mentally incompetent person at all, since sage injunction will be not maintained. In his instance, they are not ordained. They did not ordain marriage for him at all. A marriage between a mentally incompetent man and an ordinary woman, meaning regular, not competent woman, will constantly be pained by strife and will not last. In contrast, deaf mute is more passive, and his household will not necessarily be characterized by friction. Right? Deaf mute, right? Because he's got a brain. His mind is healthy. So therefore, we're talking about the deaf mute. When it comes to the mentally incompetent, they will not make such a marriage, and therefore it won't make the ksuba because there will be strife there. But for the deaf mute who's got a healthy mind, there they will make the marriage and make the ksuba in order that the woman will marry him. Similarly, our sages did not ordain marriage for a male below the age of majority. The rationale is that ultimately he will gain the potential to enter into a comprehensive marriage bond. Right? So for a man, for a minor, the sages did not. Because he'll do it on his own. That's what he's supposed to do it in a man, right? Why didn't they ordain marriage for a girl below the age of majority, although she too will ultimately gain the potential for comprehensive marriage bond, so that she will not be treated in a wanton manner. If the girl remains unmarried, the prohibitions against relations with her are not as severe. And the sages fear that they would not be upheld. If she were allowed to marry, the prohibition against adultery would be respected and she would be treated differently. Moreover, her husband will guard against her associates with other men. Wow. So listen to this. The sages allow, right, that a girl below the age of majority could get married, right? Below 12, right? Only to protect her. Because if not, then she might be abused. She might be abused. By the way, marriage doesn't mean necessarily that marriage means that there's matrimony, but not necessarily they're living together, right?
That's nice.
So that way she would be protected because she's married, because someone who's single is not protected, right? Wow, what a wisdom. You should not be allowed to marry until he has been examined and it has been determined that he has manifest signs of physical maturity. Right. So another so a boy can't be a boy, he has to be the age of majority and has to have physical signs of maturity, because if he's 13 and doesn't have physical signs of maturity, then he still can't. Right.
What is 9 years in a day?
I know we didn't say 9 years in a day here. No, 13. No, when we're in 6, we finished 6. Okay. With that, we're going to stop over here because I got to go.
See what happens if you have 2 coffees.
Okay.